And on Wednesday, U.S. President Donald Trump declined to say whether the United States is moving closer to a decision to strike Iranian nuclear facilities. This comes amid escalating tensions as Iran's supreme leader issued a stark warning to Washington, cautioning against any military action. The leader also firmly rejected President Trump's recent call for Iran to surrender and return to the negotiating table.
You even answer questions about whether you are moving closer or you believe the U.S. is moving closer to striking Iranian nuclear facilities. Where's your mindset on that?
You can't say that, right? You don't seriously think I'm going to answer that question. You don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble.
And for more on this, I want to welcome our correspondent, Wyatt Sharpe, who joins us now in studio. Wyatt, thank you for the time today.
Of course.
So what do you make of President Trump's remarks or lack of remarks? I mean, Caroline Leavitt came out today and said that we'll have a response from Donald Trump in about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? 2 weeks kind of seems like a long time to hear about a country joining a war.
Right, it really does, especially given how fast-paced and how quickly all of this has really been escalating over the course of even just this week and, really changing day by day. I think what, viewers would have saw with respect to Donald Trump and what he said was that he doesn't want to make a decision yet, and he's not going to reveal what his decision is until moments before the kind of attack would actually take place. Again, he's not saying whether or not it is going to, but basically he's making kind of an emphasis on the point of if it does actually go forward, people won't know until just seconds before the attack hits Iran. That's kind of, fairly typical, especially for, protections and for national security reasons, to really just try and maintain the integrity of the efforts and of kind of the war plans of the United States. And so certainly it'll be something that we'll see over the course of the next few days. I think we'll probably start to get more of an indication. And it's interesting to see because, of course, Donald Trump's own political party and several Republicans are feeling pretty divided over this issue. So I think a lot of what Caroline Leavitt is saying and giving 2 weeks for the White House to make a final decision is to perhaps hash out any final battles that they have, again, within the Republican Party over kind of what the best path is forward.
And what about Iran's response to not surrender when the U.S. had called for them to do so? What sort of implications do you think this is going to have?
Yeah, I mean, the Iran's supreme leader is coming out saying that if the United States decides to get involved, that's going to prompt really a full-scale regional-style dispute. And obviously, there's a lot of geopolitical tensions right now happening, not just in Israel and Iran, but of course, Israel also involved in a conflict with Hamas. You also look to Ukraine, where even the likes of Vladimir Putin, for example, has come out recently and said that he would like Russia to serve as a mediator in this conflict between Israel and Iran. Donald Trump was quick to respond to that, basically saying that Vladimir Putin doesn't have any credibility to deal with this type of a conflict, especially to be the mediator of it when he can't even get his own conflict that's happening in Ukraine under control. So that's certainly one component of this. But I think really what this kind of shows at this point is all of the Western kind of liberal democracies, if you will, seem to be aligned, and then several of the dictatorial regimes, again, whether it's Russia, whether it's China, whether it's Iran, they seem to be aligned, kind of this axis resistance of powers, if you will. And you can look to World War I, you can look to World War II, the Triple Entente, the Triple Alliance. I mean, all of these different groups of people who really, over the course of World War I and World War II, them being aligned really made their strategy much easier because they did, in fact, have similar interests.
Well, to stay on U.S. involvement, a bill has been introduced in the U.S. To prohibit the involvement of the states in this war that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
But what would the implications be if Donald Trump chose to make the decision to have the United States enter the war with senators basically speaking out against that?
Yeah, and it really kind of lies in the inner workings and the procedural kind of tactics, if you will, of the House of Representatives and of the Senate. I mean, you're referencing the bill from Representative Tom Massey, who, interestingly enough, is actually a Republican, someone who has been one of the greatest supporters of Donald Trump. And some of Donald Trump's biggest supporters have been the ones who have been the most outspoken about preventing U.S. involvement in Iran, saying it goes against kind of the America First message that Donald Trump is looking to implement. But again, really the procedural aspect of this comes down to the fact that Congress, of course, has the kind of exclusive authority to actually, declare a war. And what that means is based off of the U.S. Constitution. If the U.S. is officially in a war again after Congress declares it, that's going to trigger a number of different financial burdens. It's going to put a lot of economic strain. So Donald Trump is basically saying right now that in his position as commander-in-chief, he can actually direct many members of the military and various commanders within the military to take certain actions without it being in a full-fledged war. And certainly you've seen that with U.S. involvement in a number of different wars. They haven't fully declared war on any countries, but they have still, assisted by providing some of their troops and perhaps other humanitarian resources.
Well, on that, how might American voters react if Donald Trump takes part in another war in the Middle East that could cost quite a bit of money, but it's also sending troops in? And I mean, you saw the outcome of the war on terror. So a lot of people don't want that to happen again. And how might that affect, I guess, voting for him or voting for the Republican Party?
Right, and it's interesting because, as you mentioned, I mean, a lot of Republicans really feeling frustrated right now. The likes of Candace Owens, the likes of Tucker Carlson. I mean, these are people who have a very long history of not just supporting Donald Trump, but being extremely loyal to him, even in sometimes, going out of their way to say horrible things about people who don't support Donald Trump. And they are now the ones saying those horrible things because they feel so strongly about this issue. Donald Trump had campaigned over the course of the 2024 election that he was going to put an end to the war in Israel and that he was going to put an end to the war in Ukraine. And of course, this goes against that message. Really, there's been another war that has started. He has said that his relationship now with Vladimir Putin in Russia is not a strong relationship at all, given the fact that Vladimir Putin is refusing to come to the table and negotiate to try and reach a ceasefire and a permanent end. Trump is saying he doesn't just want a ceasefire, he wants a permanent end to these types of conflicts. So I think Republicans right now feeling pretty apathetic towards the situation, just given the fact that, again, Donald Trump is not going forward with something that was one of kind of the central pillars of his campaign.
But at the G7, Donald Trump spoke rather highly about Vladimir Putin, saying that it should be the G8. And if it was the G8, this war wouldn't have happened. And, in multiple interviews and things like that, Donald Trump has never really pointed the finger at Vladimir Putin. How do you think that Vladimir Putin would respond if Donald Trump chose to pull the trigger and attack Iran?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what you're kind of getting at there is the sense of Vladimir Putin really, I think, is someone who has a pretty short temper. And oftentimes, he can, his resentment towards, countries like the United States, Canada, again, other Western liberal democracies, that resentment can really be fueled pretty easily. So I think what Trump was getting at over the course of his time in Kananaskis at the G7 was the fact that by eliminating Russia from the G8, now the G7, after their invasion of Crimea, that really just made Vladimir Putin more angry. Again, it fueled more resentment, which made it so that he didn't want to come to the negotiating table, and perhaps fueled, after they had to pay some of those reparations, fueled again some of the resentment that caused kind of the further escalation of the war in Ukraine in February of 2022. So I don't necessarily know if Putin and Trump actually have as great of a relationship as the media and Trump himself likes to portray it as, so much as Trump is taking maybe a little bit of a balanced position, which is not very likely, very common for him, but coming out and just saying that as of right now, by not including Vladimir Putin in these types of discussions, given that he is the perpetrator of this war, it's not going to help put an end to anything.
And from a global divide perspective, could this push Iran closer to China and Russia opposed to the Western countries?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I said this earlier. I mean, kind of the three major dictatorial regimes right now in the world are Russia, China, and Iran. And that's because they're very much aligned on kind of their totalitarian, authoritarian, again, dictatorship style of governance. And they don't embrace those principles of democracy. And look, there's 92 million people living in Iran right now. The focus should be on how do we ensure that they can be evacuated, as Donald Trump had pointed out of Tehran as safely as possible, really putting a focus on the civilians, while also understanding that the perhaps best people to get rid of the Iranian government are not U.S. military forces, but rather the Iranian people themselves. I mean, you look at what happened in Syria, for example, when their government was overturned. The reason that the government was overturned successfully is not because there was foreign military involvement from countries like the United States, so much as because the people of Syria actually went forward and took it upon themselves to do it.
Now, we do have about a minute left, Wyatt, but do we know how regional allies are responding to what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, certainly kind of the axis of resistance, if you will, as I had pointed out earlier. I mean, that's Iran, that's Hezbollah, that's the Houthis. I mean, all of these regimes within kind of the Middle East who take a similar position, they are being quick to respond and they're being quick to align themselves behind Iran. And it's interesting because, as you pointed out earlier, I mean, Russia and the United States have been decently aligned. Certainly Putin and Trump have been decently aligned, but with Russia supporting Iran and then Trump supporting Israel, I mean, the United United States has always been a very pro-Israel style country. That's likely, and this is likely to perhaps kind of cause some further divides on that.
Well, Wyatt, thank you. It's always great to have you with us.
Thank you.